So, thank you very much for this opportunity to bring Earth observation to this conference. And I would like to ask my three colleagues from Black Sky, Sidus, and Earth to join me on stage, and we can delve right into the topic. And as they are coming up on the stage, I would like to share sort of two reasons why I think this panel is both very much fitting this conference, and also why our guests present a perfect mix to talk about this topic. And so for the first topic, we have seen in the last day and a half that a lot of regional operators in the regions are very much looking for EO as a source of diversification of their revenues in a phase of Starlink competition. So I think that's obviously a relevant topic, why to bring EO on stage. And then as for our panelists, if you look into their backgrounds, they obviously now all represent pretty young companies, but in the past they sort of got a chance to work at almost every influential EO company of the last 20 years or so. So Digital Globe, Planet, Satellogic, Spire, and so now their most recent roles are Shankar, CEO founder at Earth-I, Abe, business development for Asia Pacific at Black Sky, and Begzat, business development lead for space architecture at Sidus. So maybe we can start with a round of applause, and then I will start with the first question. Nice. So for the first question, obviously, Earth observation, big topic. The technology has been around for quite a while, but there is still somewhat unfulfilled potential of the technology. And so I would like to start with the most important topic, which in business are customers and revenue, and particularly with the focus on Asia Pacific. If maybe each of the panelists could talk about their current revenue split in the region across solutions, data, and satellite hardware, and then also split between military and commercial would be a good start into the topic. And Begzat, I think you can take a first step on the topic.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. I appreciate the invite. So, basically, Sidus Space is a mission-driven satellite as a data as a service provider based in Florida's space coast and providing cost-effective solutions for LEO applications. In March, we had our first satellite called LizzieSat launched, and then a few days after it was fully operational. We are getting a lot of data and results from that spacecraft, and it has a lot of capabilities, including hosted payload for NASA mission, and it has given us a lot of input into the capabilities that we would like to use for our future missions. Going to your question about how this has evolved, I think we have learned a lot of. Lessons from this mission, which will help us in future missions. So we have a launch scheduled for next month, and then also the third launch scheduled for March of next year. And using those capabilities and lessons learned, I think it has given us a lot of insight into how we can deploy more solution, derivative, and cost-effective for the next generation of the LizzieSat. And finally, I would like to say that we started as having a self-funded project, and we had hosted payload on this spacecraft, but we are getting a lot of interest from government and intelligence community in terms of they would like to fly those kind of payloads in the future missions. So we see a lot of interest coming that route.
Nice. Well, thank you for the interaction. And again, it sounds like government intelligence is currently leading the path. So maybe is it similar at Black Sky, or is the commercial market having a bit more traction on video?
Let me start. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by introducing Black Sky, which is a new space technology company. We are based in United States, in Washington, D.C. We are a real-time intelligence company owning and operating our own satellites, a set of 14 satellites in a constellation We are a vertically integrated company, so we design and manufacture our own satellites, as well as provide the downstream services, both data and analytics. As far as our consumer segmentation is concerned, our core business value proposition is speed. So we are a very high revisit, high frequency, and low latency constellation flying in the mid-inclined orbits that provides us almost like a 15 days in an intraday revisit to map certain targets around the world. So with this core capabilities, the most interesting market segmentation that we are addressing is defense and intelligence. Although having said that, the commercial market is emerging now and emerging in a big way. So you have infrastructure companies, you have mining companies, and other exploration companies, both in environment and mineral and resources, which are coming up to utilize these kind of assets and services.
Nice, thank you for the background. And Shankar, how is it for you, split commercial and government revenue?
Right, so thank you. Good afternoon, folks. So we are born in Asia-Pac. It's building the ecosystem in Asia-Pac. So we are building that from Asia-Pac. So we are a Singapore headquartered company. We have presence in Australia and India. And for those who have not heard about us before, how many of you took Grab to get here? Only a few. How many of you plan to order in? I know there's a dinner here tonight, but if not today, another day, Grab food. Do you get in Grab food? Perfect. We are the same for satellites. We are the Grab or the Grab food for Earth observation satellites, the largest satellite aggregator for direct tasking. So everything that Abhineet said, 14 satellites, 475 plus satellites and growing. So essentially all the sensor modalities, just like in Grab and Grab food, you have choices. That's exactly what we provide, which means lots and lots of use cases. Having said that, 50% of our customer base is defense for the kind of capability we built. It's a responsive acquisition platform. When you need, where you need, with what sensors you need, at the price point you need is our kind of narrative, solving the accessibility, affordability, and usability of Earth observation data. Having said that, so 50% defense, 25% government, the remaining 25% commercial. Asia-Pac is our largest market, followed by Africa, and then United Kingdom. That's where we are. We are 18 months old company. Thank you.
Nice, well done. And maybe now I would like to turn into a couple of company-specific questions. And Abhay, I would like to start with you because I think at the beginning of this year, so in February, you announced pretty big contract with Indonesia, which I think is obviously important both for the country but for your company as well. So maybe if you could give us a hint on how significant this contract is and sort of what does it entail, what are you hoping to achieve?
So as I said, Black Sky is a vertically integrated company. We design and manufacture our own satellites. That also gives us the ability to provide sovereign space infrastructure capabilities to different nations here in Asia and other places in the world. So there is an emerging trend where every nation wants to have a footprint in this space. Some have taken large leads into making that happen. Some are contemplating, and some are the laggers behind who are still kind of following the trend. Now, as Filip mentioned, we recently announced a win in Indonesia where Black Sky is responsible for providing space infrastructure and infrastructure on the ground. That is completely a sovereign capability where satellites will be built and launched by Black Sky, and it will be handed over to the national agencies, which is typically the Ministry of Defense, to own and operate this constellation. But that is not the whole story behind this use case, because building a space infrastructure and ground infrastructure is usually a 3 to 5 year program. So what are you going to do while waiting to have your infrastructure built both on ground and space? This is where Shankar mentioned aggregating the data, or Black Sky providing from day one service to access the existing constellation so that you don't have to wait for 3 to 5 years to become operational and useful. So the whole program is built with the eye on not only creating these infrastructure which are sovereign capabilities, but also very interesting business models that allow your investment in space and ground to be monetized, because you are not going to use those infrastructure all the time. These are global satellites which goes around everywhere. So if they are not passing over Indonesia, you can monetize that asset and very well get returns on investment. So it's a very comprehensive program built with the idea of crawl, walk, and run strategy, where you start with existing infrastructure that is commercially available, then you start building your own infrastructure before you start to fly. So it's a very interesting win for us. Looking at the similar trend, you have other nations who are aspiring to do the same, similar kind of programs, and there is not just one. Due to NDA, I cannot kind of mention the names of the countries or the program names, but it is very self-evident that most of the countries here in Asia Pacific is aspiring to replicate the success in United States. So we are very excited to have this kind of opportunity. This is one of its kind in the world, where a space infrastructure is sold to a sovereign country, and it is built and operated by the national organization. So let me stop here and kind of turn it back to Filip.
Nice, and maybe I would turn it to Behzad and Shankar. Obviously, sovereign infrastructure has been a big topic, and it sounds like maybe both of you have been to chip in on the topic. You know, how can, respective your company, help in helping countries deliver their sovereign programs, constellations?
So I'll just pick up on what Abhineet said, right? It's brilliant that Abhineet and the likes of Abhineet, Sidus, and others build constellations for countries. We come along and, like Abhineet said, beyond their area of interest, these assets also need to be monetized because it's taxpayer-funded assets, infrastructure. So that's how we come into play. So we not only host, how did we get to be who we are in this large scale and scope of operation? It's not just commercial operators. We also onboard government dual-use satellites. So governments, beyond their own use, they want to monetize their capacity elsewhere, so they're on our platform. So that's one part of the story about governments going into a program like Abhineet mentioned, knowing that they can also monetize beyond their own sovereign requirements. The second part is, until nation states are spacefaring, i.e. get their own satellites in space, even beyond that, we become an augmented platform. So the analogy I have is, you may have one or two vehicles parked in your driveway, but you all still take Grab. You may cook at home, but you still order Grab food. That's how we come in. Nation states have their own assets, may not have their own assets, taking public transport. So we come in to provide this capability, which is like Grab for somebody who was always taking public transport. Grab came along and changed that. Same way we provide a platform with all these assets and make that customer, whether it's defense, government, commercial, instantly spacefaring or space capable. So that's how we bring the time to space for these entities and organizations. But once they got their assets in space through Abhineet and others, those assets also find a place in our platform. So these customers become both, these entities become both customers of our platform, but also providers or partners of our platform. So it's a very nice symbiotic relationship we have with these folks.
Yeah, I would just like to add one comment. As getting to space is becoming easier and cheaper as we get launch costs down, I think sovereign nations are looking into data as a service capability to start with, especially with emerging nations, and they would like to have their own capabilities, right? So we can provide them data as a service, and then as a follow-on, when they have their payloads available and ready and they want to have their unique infrastructure, I think giving them that access to space is super important, and that's why they need to have a capability to perform those kind of missions that they have, right? So with Sidus, I think there's a very good opportunity because of the cost effective of the solution and the infrastructure to basically get to that mission that they have in mind. And we do have manufacturing and vertically integrated capability in-house, which kind of provides those nations with a lot of cost-effective solutions for their upcoming missions. So I think it's important that we look at this at two stages. One is the data as a service that they start with, and then also having their own dedicated mission in space as they go forward.
Nice. Thank you very much also for the lively discussion. So Shankar, turning the page to you, something I saw which I think is quite interesting and important is that you spend quite some time on sort of educating users on the potential of Earth observation, and what I'm particularly referencing is the seminar in Malaysia you did, I think, for some of the government officials there. So could you talk a bit about, why do you do this? How do you structure such, training programs, and maybe what are you trying to achieve, and why is this important?
Right. So, see, optical is well understood. I mean, there are many users here, whether you know it or not, you're probably using optical in some shape or form when you're looking at Google Earth Engine or whatever platform, but you might be. In Malaysia, countries like Malaysia, it's, some parts of the world, some parts of Malaysia, you're lucky 2 days a year you get cloud-free, right? It's perennially cloudy. So naturally, the sensor of choice there needs to be SAR, synthetic aperture radar. So that's the workshop that Filip is referring to, we ran. Essentially educating users in countries which are, or places which are clouded most of the year, how to use SAR in the various use cases they may find value. And therein comes the difference between us and a traditional operator. We are a software platform that just connects to lots and lots of sensors: optical, SAR, thermal, AIS, RF, you name it, every possible sensor. Other day somebody was asking, what is that one Earth observation sensor that you do not have on your platform? I said, we do not have one sensor. That's because it hasn't gone to space yet, which is LiDAR. LiDAR from space, which is coming next year. But for that, we got every possible Earth observation sensor modality. So what it also means is some of these sensors need education, need evangelization, needs handholding. SAR is not an easy data to use. And that's just one aspect of it. The second dimension of it is we are multi-user tasking platform, multi-sensor tasking platform. We have the ability, that's why we use the analogy grab food, ability to combine different sensors in the same task flow, just like you can order different cuisine from different restaurants in a grab food or Uber Eats. We'll talk about what those benefits of doing that tasking is, what the use cases that it unlocks. But if you're going to do that, then your capability needs to be even greater than just using one sensor, which is what most user base is familiar with. So this is where we need to do a lot of evangelization and education, either single sensor or multi-sensor use.
Nice, thank you very much. And back that earlier this year, you had quite an interesting announcement with the FCC approval for the LizzieSat 2-5 sort of micro constellation of 4 satellites. So maybe you could give us a bit of background on this specific approval, but more importantly, what is the plan for the micro constellation, and what are your expectations for the LizzieSat 2-5?
It's a lot of work that needs to be done with the FCC in terms of getting approvals and licenses. So it takes months and a lot of back and forth. So we've been involved with a lot of discussions, and now that we have announced that we've got the approvals, I think it makes it much easier for us going forward for the LizzieSat 2-5 to have them all those follow-on approvals and move forward. So that's very good news for us. I would like to add that with these announcements that we've made about the upcoming micro constellations that we are having, I think we are basically learning the lessons from our current mission that is on orbit, and we can use kind of the the software upgrades and the capabilities, the firmware additions that we have added to our next generation to this upcoming constellation, and basically deploy that for having a more efficient capability for our customers. So we do have some hosted payload customers that they have already signed up, and looking into getting them on orbit, as well as we just made an announcement with HEO, which is an imager, and this is not only looking down to the Earth, but also looking at other objects and space debris in orbit to get that data. And one thing I would like to add is that we do have a proprietary AI solution called Feather Edge, and that basically processes the data and filters all the information that are necessary, and gets those kind of onboarding processing in space. So basically reduces the time to transfer the data back to Earth, and then if needed to go through reiteration. So that has been very successful, and we have used that capability in the next generation that we are going to deploy in next year.
Nice. Well, exciting update. Thank you very much for that. Any of your colleagues would like to chip in, or can we move to the next question? Can move to the next question. And after that, I would like to open for the audience, for questions from the audience. So maybe my colleagues could help me facilitate that. I don't know if there is a QR code, and if not, then we can do it all traditional way. So one topic I wanted to specifically deep dive into is our multi-sensor missions, and sort of the benefit multi-sensor Earth observation is bringing to customers. And if you could actually bring one specific customer success story of bringing together multiple kinds of EO data, that would be really interesting. And maybe Shankar, would you like to take lead on that first?
Sure. That's a great question. So when you talk about multi-sensor tasking, two dimensions to it, at least from our perspective, in terms of enabling different use cases. One is what we call task together, which means you combine a few sensors, or all sensors, if that's what your use case requires. You can task them together. The second is sequence the tasking. So you have sensors that are tasked sequentially, and in either case, there's no human in the loop. So let's look at what those two scenarios mean. So when you task something together, it's usually for context. So greenhouse gas emission is a good example. So when a customer tasks looking for emission, so they're tasking a greenhouse gas, or whether it's methane emission, CO2 emission, what they get is the emission plume. They get the emission reading. But you don't have the context. If you go put that on Google Earth Engine on some place that the latest data was 6 months ago, you don't know what was that emission from. So what you do, you task a greenhouse gas with multispectral, as an example. So when you task it together, the data arrives together, so you have a context, a more recent temporal context of that emission. That's a very simple example of multi-sensor tasking. Other good example is, which everybody will appreciate, is in vegetation. Typically, you task multispectral to understand some sort of a vegetation index to know health of the crop. That only tells you part of the story. Today, customers task multispectral with thermal until hyperspectral comes mainstream. What it does is the thermal signature will tell you if the crop has a disease, because every crop has a thermal stage signature, and if there's a stress, it will show. And when you fuse the two together, you get a more enriched story about your crop. These are examples of why we task together. The sequence is even more interesting. And there are some defense use cases of why you task together in maritime context as well, right? Dark vessels, AIS gets switched off, and then you are basically looking for any signal from RF context, marine radar, X-band, S-band. So when you do that, you also want to see if somebody is using any SATCOMs, L-band, VHF, UHF. So you task these sensors together. Furthermore, you want to now also take a picture of what that vessel or that activity happening in the maritime context is. Depending on the day and night, you could task either optical or SAR. These can all be tasked together. And in fact, on our platform, our defense customers, Navy, Coast Guards, they do this routinely. Now, coming to sequence tasking is when you get two sensors to work together, when the conditions of the first sensor is met, then the second sensor automatically gets tasked 24/7. You are sleeping, doesn't matter. The first sensor, did it work? The observations was recorded or detected. Second sensor automatically got tasked, and that chain can continue. First, second, third. It's called sequence tasking. You task it together as a multi-sensor tasking. A classic example, a very simplest example before going into tip and cue that in defense context they'll talk about. I see something, then I want to see the details of it. I zoom in, and therefore I'd use tip and cue workflow between coarser resolution and high resolution, between different sensor modalities, optical, SAR, what have you. But the simplest we have, what people use, is they task a SAR, then they put the follow-on sensor for optical, only when cloud cover threshold is not breached. So it will keep collecting in SAR, and the optical threshold is less than 20. It will automatically switch from SAR to optical without you having to get up and task on optical. So things like this is a sequence tasking, and that's how multi-sensor works.
Well, thank you for the exhaustive overview on the topic. And Abhay, would you like to continue?
Yeah, well, there could be different conditions, different modalities adding to what Shankar mentioned. A single platform itself could contain multiple sensors. So the technology is evolving now where you can have multiple optical cameras. Black Sky's next generation satellites will carry 3 cameras. It could also contain sensors for optical intersatellite data links. Or, for example, it could also contain a small AIS module or a RF module. So not only aggregating data from multiple constellation and multiple assets, it is also evolving in the sense of a single platform carrying multiple sensors. So I think the technology is at a verge of where there would be technological breakthroughs. I don't know if the company called as Galaxy Eyes, somebody is here, because they are experimenting having a SAR and a optical data on the same platform. It is unheard, it is unimaginable to conceive a platform which can carry such as opposite dimensionally opposite sensors on the same platform. But these are all the technological advances that are happening in the same context as Shankar explained exhaustively, where customers do not want to make a decision based on subjective evaluation. This is all AI-driven, human-less workflows, where decisions are taken by machines, and they are very, very effective as of today. But I'm sure there is a long way to go in terms of automating these kind of systems.
Behzad, would you like to follow up?
No, this is great. I just would like to add one aspect to this, and that's like the data transfer, right? So it's super important that once everything that was mentioned, we can process this data in space, or if you are bringing it down to Earth, right? So right now, the infrastructure is being developed, and because Earth observations gathers a lot of data, it's a limitation with RF bandwidth. We are seeing a trend towards using like intersatellite links and laser communication to bring data down to ground, and that's being discussed and developed, and it's being implemented it started as experiments, but now it's being commercially becoming available. So it's important that we look at kind of transferring that data to the destination and to the user's hand in pretty much real time.
Nice. Well, again, thank you for the answer, and I was hoping that you will cover a little bit the optical links the next generation of your satellites are carrying, and edge computing as well. So nicely done. I think we could have a time, so we have 10 minutes left. I would like to bring in maybe 1 or 2 quick questions from the audience, if anybody would like to, ask our panelists. Oh, nice. I can see the questions now. So, well, let's talk about the Black Sky Gen 3 first, Abhay.
Okay, let me take the Black Sky Gen 3 launching. It's a big trade secret for me to be announcing the date when it's not publicly announced. We are a public listed company, so I'm not at the liberty of telling you the exact date. Otherwise, my share prices are going to go up or down. Keeping the sensitivity of business trade information, I can inform you that we are pretty much at the verge of an open window of 30 days within this quarter. So this is as close as I can disclose in terms of our launching plan. But come next year, there are multiple tranches in which this constellation will grow up to a size of 24 satellites. Now, what happens, and I'm just adding a little bit more context to why 24 satellites, is because today, with 14 satellites, our revisit is 15 times in a single day in higher latitudes. And our latency from capture to delivering the imagery and analytics to the war fighters in the front is less than 90 minutes. Now, is this sufficient for us in terms of a defense intelligence context? Maybe not. So Gen 3 has got capabilities. With 24 satellites, the revisit will come down to less than 30 minutes, and the data delivery from capture to the end users with the analytics will come down to 30 minutes or less. So that's the aim, and we hope that we can achieve this with 24 satellites.
Yes, again, exciting update, and interesting to hear that actually both of you are representing publicly traded companies, and perhaps you are actually like less transparent as a consequence of that. Second question, also really interesting. So it's asking about non-Earth imaging, so taking snapshots of objects in space, and what could be impact on national security for the nation in Asia Pacific. And Behzad, you've got the HEO imager on your mission, so maybe you could take this question.
Yeah, I think both non-Earth imaging and Earth imaging, I think they complement each other. It's very important because you can take an image of the infrastructure on the ground, but also there are assets in space that are becoming more and more important with national security, especially as we look at the Asia-Pacific region with the South China Sea and the developments and the tensions that are going there in that region. So I think right now, there's a demand from basically, I would say, from the governments and looking into what kind of assets and space assets are there. And this is like multi-orbit regimes, right? So it can be LEO, MEO, and GEO, and basically understanding how the different players are behaving there. It can be some challenges there and make some decisions based on those information that are coming in. As we are looking down to Earth, it's important to be aware of kind of developments in orbit. And as you mentioned, we have made a partnership with HEO for their imaging capability telescope, which is about having this constellation in the LizzieSat constellation, where we can take those images and data as a service and provide them, provide the end user with pretty much real-time data for like in-space objects and other satellites that are out there.
Nice, thank you very much. And last question from the audience before we will wrap up. So Negar is asking if you are building your satellites in a way that they are modular and easy to plug and play new payloads and subsystems. So either of you would like to take the question?
Yes, literally speaking, these satellites are modular. They are mostly plug and play. So we are building the legacy from generation 2 to generation 3. We are simply changing the payload would make do in terms of using the existing heritage or the existing legacy components. So from that standpoint, this question is very interesting. We use, plug and play technologies most of the time, but also keeping in mind how the technology is evolving, how the user missions are evolving. We are also experimenting with multiple payloads, which necessitates us to use a different bus systems. So when Gen 2 was launched, our bus was a 100 kilogram bus. Now Gen 3 would be a 200 kilo bus. And when we move to the next generation technology, we are going to use much bigger, larger bus with 300 kilogram size and weight. So keeping that the supply chain is very constrained in this industry, it is important for us to keep the technology modular and plug and play.
Nice, and I think it's time to wrap up. So one last question I would like to ask all of you. We spoke a lot about your individual company, so maybe if we zoom out a little bit to extend the remaining 4 minutes allow us. In 2024, did we move closer to sort of fulfilling the promise of Earth observation and the ubiquity of data to solve business problems and maybe defense, security, environmental problems on Earth, or did the challenges sort of bring us back this year?
Oh, me? Okay, yeah, absolutely. I think with the promise of accessibility and affordability, even before we get to usability, we've seen a surge. It's a plug here. It's $5,000 to get on the platform, and it's a credit for 1 year. And you could just draw down tasking. And when you finish, just like prepaid mobile, top up. That actually got us several space agencies who would have otherwise continued to rely on public good data, Landsat Sentinel. Today they have access to 475 plus satellites just because they could find that $5,000, right? So we have small and medium businesses, but also governments who otherwise would have to go through a very prolonged tender process. But a lot of these folks who are signing up, they have this authority limit at $50,000 or $75,000, not 75 million. So they can easily sign up and get on board. What does it all mean? It means we're able to get this capability in the hands of users faster, which means they are putting Earth observation data in the context of their problems and starting to solve them. I think that's what 2024 did from our perspective.
For us, 2024 has been a breakthrough year with this Indonesian project coming through. Again, being a publicly listed company, I am not at the liberty of telling everything in terms of what goes in and what numbers are there. But there has been an exponential growth in our business. Most of it coming from defense and intelligence customers, from as small as 25,000 subscription to as large as $50 million subscription. So because we are vertically integrated, we provide both hardware, engineering, and the data as a service, subscription-based service. There is a little nuance in terms of how we do business in the market, but overall 2024 did pretty well for Black Sky, and hopefully we'll continue to do this in years coming forward.
I would like to add that this year we launched in March the first LizzieSat for a company of the size of Sidespace, about 100 employees. That's a great achievement. We have the next one coming up in a few weeks. So 2 launches in a year, hopefully successful launches in 1 year. I think that's really important for us. And then we learned a lot of lessons. We hosted payloads for NASA. And also, we are selling services. We made a strategic announcement with different companies for our upcoming constellation, and also got the FCC approval. So it has been a great year for us, and I think next year would be even better given the opportunities that they had.
Nice, and that's, I think, a great positive note on which to wrap up. So I would like to ask you to join me in thanking our panelists and move on. Thank you very much.